Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Crystal Thornton. If you have not known, I just wanted to talk about today Halloween. So, what better way to talk about Halloween than with aspiring apologist? I decided to bring on my friend Nate Bozeman, who is aspiring to be an apologist, who is a radio host, and he knows so much about these controversial topics. I just thought it was best to bring him on and talk about such a topic as this. And what better time to do it than now? We're on the cusp of Halloween, so let's get into it and let's talk about it. So, introducing my friend Nate Bozeman.
How's it going?
Hey Nate, how are you?
I'm doing awesome. How are you guys?
We're doing good. So, let the people know what we're talking about today.
So yeah, we're going to be talking about Halloween and whether or not like Christians should practice it. Should we be weary of it? What's the history of it? We're going to get into all the nitty and gritty of it, the good, the bad, the ugly of Halloween.
Yeah, definitely. I know it's a controversial topic with us in today's society that should we celebrate it? Should we not? Should we even dress up? All the good stuff. So, just want you to explain like your take on Halloween when you grew up and how it was for you, and I can bounce back off of you.
You know what's funny is growing up, we never even really celebrated Halloween in my home. Like my mom kind of thought it was like evil and she didn't
Yeah.
want anything to do with it. And then as we got older, she kind of got out of that a little bit. And but by the time she got over it, I was already like 15, 16, didn't really care about Halloween or trick or treating. So I've
Yeah.
actually only gone trick or treating once in my whole life.
Hmm.
And I didn't even go for a long time. I don't even think I dressed up. I think I just like hung out with friends, walked around, went to like 2 or 3 houses and got a few pieces of candy because I don't have much of a sweet tooth. And so I was like 2 or 3 candy bars is good for me. I'm going home. And so
Yeah.
and these days what we do is we kind of just sit in the driveway and
Hmm.
we light a bonfire and we make s'mores, and then if kids come up, we give them candy. And so I mean, I've never really been a big Halloween person, but as of today, I don't really have any issues with it.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank God you don't have a sweet tooth. I do. So I love the candy, and especially if it's free. But so yeah, we grew up celebrating it. I know that there's a lot of like talk on Day of the Dead or like the Catholics and things like that. I was not Catholic. So I grew up as a pretty much as a Christian in middle school. So we did still celebrate Halloween and dressed up and things like that. And even before I moved to Georgia, probably a year or two before, I remember dressing up like as a really scary girl and had to repent and denounce those things. But yeah, I've done it. I've celebrated. Me and my cousins would used to drink a lot on Halloween. Like it was an excuse to just drink and party and things like that. So I am familiar with all that and have engaged in the activities. But yeah, so I have a take, like I said. But we want to talk about is Halloween demonic? So point blank, do you think it is demonic?
That's a tough question to answer easily, but if I were to give a short answer, some people use it for that, and that doesn't mean the day in itself is demonic or satanic, but some people definitely use it for those purposes.
Yeah.
And so I would say for some, yes, for others, no. Like I don't think like the kids that are just like dressing up as Mario and Luigi and going and getting candy. I don't think that's demonic, but there are people like that perform witchcraft on Halloween and things like that. And for those people, yes, obviously that's demonic. So I think, I tend to not want to say like definite yes, definite no for everyone because I think different people use it for different reasons.
Yeah, yeah. And I think people's motives are just so different. Like, you can have motives for good and motives for evil. And I truly believe that the Lord makes every day. And I don't think that a specific day is evil because it even says in the Bible, every day is from the Lord. And I just think that to say that it's a day is demonic, but to celebrate or to engage in something, I believe is demonic. So just coming into agreement with something or saying, hey, I want to partake in evil, that is another realm of being demonic. So,
Yes. We should
so
absolutely like stay away from all forms and appearances of evil. First Thessalonians tells us that. And
yeah.
so Like I don't believe Christians should, for example, dress up in evil costumes. Like I don't think Christians should be dressing up as like Michael Myers or like I don't know, Freddy Krueger. Like, and I don't
Yeah.
think there's a lot of women out there that use Halloween as like a day to dress seductively, like you know the nurses and all those types of outfits. I don't think Christian females should be doing that. So you have
Yeah.
to avoid the forms of evil. But I do think there are wholesome ways rather to celebrate Halloween. I don't think everyone is in it for those reasons, but I think that we as Christians, the Bible tells us we should be set apart. And so, you know, we
Definitely.
should, if we're going to participate in Halloween, we should do it in a way that glorifies God and we should do it in a way that is edifying to the people around us.
Yeah, I agree. So I even believe in Ephesians 5 where it says don't participate in the fruitless works of the darkness, but instead expose them. So I even believe that in these times of Halloween, we can expose the darkness. I think you mentioned in your previous videos that pastors go and they hand out tracts or they preach or whatever it is. And I think this is an opportunity for us to shine light on the gospel and shine light on Jesus because he is the maker and the founder of each day. So I truly believe even though they want to rule and reign and be in darkness, we can still shine and let them know like, hey, this is not the way. There's another way and it's a better way.
Yeah, Mike Winger, he's one of my favorite Christian YouTubers, and he says that on Halloween, he just goes like door to door and hands out gospel tracts. Or on the days where they stay home, like when Christians or not Christians, when people come and like trick or treat, he gives them candy and gospel tracts. And so he uses it as like an opportunity to evangelize. And so I think, if you're a Christian out there and you're like, I'm not participating in Halloween, at least, hand out gospel tracts, like you could buy them online, you could print them out whatever, and then just get some candy. And then like, as you're handing out candy, just give out the gospel, like there's obviously nothing demonic about telling people about Jesus. So
Yeah, and I really think just using it for good. Like I remember my husband even saying like he went on a trail walk or something like that, like a trail where it shows you like at the end how hell is and things like that. And I think using it just to preach the gospel and to minister to people that don't know that they're going to hell or don't know that there is a hell for one. And we want to own a church one day. So really, I think we've talked about like having prayer or worship sessions or baptisms and trail walks and things like that. Doing those types of things where we can let people know like, hey, there is a demonic realm. There is an opposer of you. And this is who he is. And we want you to come to Jesus.
amen.
So just I know there's different ways to preach and to minister to the gospel. So we as Christians can do that on that day, and it doesn't have to. We don't have to just sit back and watch TV and let it all play out. But do as the Lord tells you to do, and if you feel led to minister and evangelize, then do that.
And like you said earlier, every day comes from God. I'm not willing to give Satan a day on the calendar. I'm just going to throw that out there. I'm not willing to say like October 31st is Satan's and the rest of the
Mhm.
year is God's. Like I'm not willing to say that. And so
Yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like if we say like October 31st is off limits, what we're doing is we're giving Satan a day on the calendar, and I'm just not willing to do that. And we can participate in things and do it in a way that glorifies God and like the evangelism and stuff we mentioned earlier. And I think that if we have that mindset rather than, oh, I'm staying away from it because it looks sketchy and some people use it for evil. I think if we rather take on a mindset of, well, I'm not going to let Satan have a day on the calendar. I'm going to let 365 days a year be God's. Then I think we'll be in a much better place. And I think it's just become so popular. Like I've seen on like Instagram and YouTube, it's becoming like almost unanimous, like and ubiquitous around the internet that like people are just kind of backing off of Halloween and saying Christians avoid it. And I don't want fear to run Christianity. Like people are
yeah,
afraid that like Satan has got a hold on this. And I, I have a verse that I wanted to share real quick. It's from Colossians. It's
hmm
a beautiful verse. It tells us Satan, he has been disarmed. God or Jesus has disarmed the rulers and authorities. He's made a public display of them and he's triumphed over them. And
yeah,
the Greek words for this disgraced and disarmed, these are like very strong Greek words. So like
mhm,
I saw a sermon on this recently where basically the word disgrace there is like he has been publicly humiliated. So like imagine like the most
exactly.
embarrassing display possible, and that's what Jesus has done to Satan through the
Mhm.
cross. And so when we give Satan a day on the calendar, we are not accepting that he's been disgraced and disarmed. Like, we're giving him power that he doesn't have. And I don't think we should do that.
Yeah, yeah. We're like calling what was done at the cross like null and void, and it's not like in any day. So I think Satan, he barks around like a little chihuahua and he wants us to think that he's so big and bad, but he's not. Even in October, I know that they want to say that it's the witch's hour, the witch's month, and all these things, but truly that we do have the power in we do. We always will in Christ. So just want you to give a little background, Nate, on some history that you've learned with Halloween and what that all entails.
Yes, this is very important because a lot of times I'm hearing it all over the internet. Like I said, people are saying Christians back off of Halloween.
Yeah.
And what they're all saying is it traces back to this ancient Celtic holiday called Samhain, that has been happening for a very, very long time in the Celtic regions.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is this just isn't true. And so I just want to at the very front of this just say that isn't the case. And here's why. So let's break down the history of Samhain. And our earliest source on Samhain is called the Surglage Concullen. It basically says Samhain descends from this festival, and all they would do is eat, feast, play sports, hang out, and they would just spend time together to celebrate the end of summer and to celebrate the harvest season. And so basically, it was a time for the Celtic people to get together and to, just celebrate the harvest and the end of summer. And then over the centuries, basically, like Christianity was spreading across the world. And a lot of people just want to say, like, the Catholic Church just Christianized Samhain and, like, uh, basically moved All Saints' Day to this day to Christianize Samhain. And then the rest is history. We're just practicing this pagan holiday from the ancient Celts.
Yeah.
But to describe the history extremely quickly, basically, All Saints' Day was in April. It was not practiced in October, November. It was
Mm-hmm.
on, I believe it was like April 20 something. I don't want to get that wrong, but it's sometime
Yeah.
in April. And the problem with this is a very problematic fact for someone that wants to say Halloween comes from Samhain, because what we need to have happen is Samhain is happening on October 31st, and then the Catholics just throw All Saints' Day on top of it to, like, Christianize it. But that's not the case. What ends up happening is, like I said, it starts in April, and then in Germany, they move it to November 1st, not the Celtic regions. And remember,
Mm-hmm.
it's the Celtic regions that are practicing Samhain. And so the Germanic regions move it to November 1st, and then obviously that makes Halloween October 31st. And then everyone else, all the other Christian nations followed suit because they wanted to kind of like be in step with one another. So all the Catholic churches moved it to November 1st as well. And so this is a very problematic fact if you're trying to say like Samhain was Christianized into All Saints' Day. It's just simply not historically defensible. And then
Mm-hmm.
in the early 1900s, like, people just used Halloween as like a time to vandalize. Like,
Mm-hmm.
people didn't even like Halloween. There was actually a couple of presidents that were going to abolish Halloween. And so, and
Yeah.
this is the funny thing about it is, like, people weren't even practicing Halloween, like All Saints' Day and all that stuff. And if you think about it now, on November 1st, do any of us practice All Saints' Day? Only the
Yeah.
Catholics do, right? So
Yeah.
so this should show us that All Saints' Day is really disconnected from the history that it comes from. And then finally in 1950, this is where trick or treating really gets solidified. And guess where it comes from? It comes from a fundraiser for UNICEF, and they were raising funds and raising money for mothers and families who were affected by World War II. And
Mm.
so they would go door to door raising money for charity. And then this spread across the United States by the 1960s. And so it started with like one little group of kids, like this mom started taking her kids, like, hey, we're going to go door to door and raise money for a charity. And then this spread like wildfire. UNICEF picked it up. And then basically, if I could just summarize it quickly, it would be capitalism took over. Like, all the
Yeah.
candy companies were like, oh, we're doing Halloween. Okay, well, let's get some candy involved. And like the costume companies were like, oh, we're doing Halloween. Why don't you dress up while you go? And then the Hallmark cards were doing all that. And then, so this is where trick or treating took off. And so we can tell it has nothing to do with ancient history. It's just, it comes from like fundraising and then just like all the companies hopped on.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, Hollywood. We can't discount Hollywood. In like the 1970s, the first Halloween movie came out in the October season, and then this started a whole new genre of movies that we all know and now we associate with the Halloween time. And so the reason we associate Halloween with like horror and exorcisms and all this stuff, it's mostly because Hollywood started making movies and now they just play them around this time. And so now in our heads, when we think Halloween, we think demons and witches and all this stuff. When
Mhm.
in reality, that wasn't the case before the 1970s. This is a very recent, like, accretion, I guess you could say.
Yeah, yeah. So do you think that there's any like demonic roots in Halloween or just even in like the history that you've learned thus far about it?
So this is where it gets complicated because in the Germanic regions, they did move All Saints' Day to the same day as Samhain. But
Mhm.
again, they didn't do this to Christianize Samhain. They just moved it on the same day. And so
Mhm.
it gets a little bit tricky here because in modern America, modern Halloween practices come from the things I just mentioned. It's like Hollywood, UNICEF, all this stuff.
Mhm.
However, there are pagans and neo-pagans and people who practice witchcraft today who do have roots in Samhain and do have roots in these Celtic traditions because a lot of Celtic people actually did migrate to the United States in the 1900s, and so they brought some of those Samhain roots with them. But
Yeah.
again, it's not tied to modern Halloween. They are tied to Samhain, and then obviously witches and neo pagans and all these people they love it, and Satanists as well. They treat it as a holy day, and so there's
Mhm.
almost like two separate um things going on at the same time. It's like there's American Halloween over here where it's like dress up, get candy, go to your neighbor's house. And then
Yeah.
there's this over here where it's like, yeah, we're doing witchcraft, we're doing seances, we got the Ouija boards out. And it's like they because Samhain and Halloween are on the same night, they look like they're connected, but
Mhm.
they're not. They're actually disconnected, but
Yeah.
um but they're on the same night. And so a lot of people that have roots in that are going to on Halloween night be doing some crazy stuff, but it's not because they're connected to Halloween, and that doesn't mean that's where Halloween comes from.
Yeah. So if that's happening, why do you think Christians in a way should compromise with going out on these days or engaging in trick or treating or engaging in Halloween parties or anything like that if these things are going on? The witchcraft, the seances, the spells, all that.
Well, I think I would just say that we don't want to conflate those two things, right? So what I don't want to say is like if let's just picture like a family of four, and let's say like the parents and the kids they dress up as like I don't know they dress up as Mario, Luigi. That's the example I've been using, and like Princess Peach and Princess Daisy, and they're just knocking on their neighbors' doors and like getting candy. What I don't wanna say is that's the same thing as, like, those people doing the witchcraft, like people sitting there with a Ouija board with candles lit. I'm not willing to say those are the same thing. And
Mhm.
so, I think we have to be able to add a little bit of nuance to the conversation of, like, these people over here are doing this, but that doesn't mean the family of 4 over here are participating in what they're doing because they're
Okay.
clearly not, you know what I mean? They're obviously doing something different. They're just having a good time. They're making memories with their family. They're just going and getting candy with their kids. They're making memories. And then you
Yeah.
got people over here that are like, "Yeah, I'm trying to communicate with the dead. I'm doing all
Mm.
this weird stuff." But
Yeah.
we have to remember once again, the only reason these 2 things happen on the same night is because All Saints Day and Samhain and Halloween happen to be on the same day. It's not because they're actually connected. It's just because they happen on the same day. It looks that way, but
Yeah.
that's actually not that they're not actually connected in any way, historically speaking. And I do have a quote from a historian that I could read. If you could talk for just a second while I find it, I do want to read it for everyone listening.
Yeah. Well, I think personally, like me and my take with candy is I even told Gabe about it. Like, how would I think we normalize taking candy from strangers on Halloween? But if someone approached my son at the park and was like, here's some candy, and I'm like, hold on, let me see where this is from. Like, why are you giving my son candy? And I know last year there was such an epidemic or of fentanyl being in candy, and there was such a scare like, hey, check your
Yep.
kids' candy because you don't know what's in it. So what else could be in it? We don't know. And I think right now there's such an attack on children, like with their identity, with just taking them out completely and changing their their sex of who they are. And so I just personally don't trust giving out candy and taking candy from strangers. I understand you can
Yeah.
search it and look at it, but who really knows, like, if it's fentanyl? Like, you don't know until you touch it, and then by the time you touch it, it's probably too late. So
Yeah. Yeah.
just having
No,
that
that's true.
discernment and things like that, when you have kids, your perspective and your paradigm shift really changes a lot. Like, you get so much more
Hmm.
cautious, so much more aware. Like, you don't want to do things that you once did. And I truly think it's just the Holy Spirit, like, protecting, the kids, because those are his kids as well. And so just making sure, like, you have that discernment as a believer, like, should I be taking this? Should I look into this candy? And even, I know you mentioned in your video to pray over it, but even some
Yeah.
people don't have discernment of even praying for their
Yeah.
food. Like, they get a Chipotle bowl, they're like, oh, eat it. They don't
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
pray for it. So I think sometimes it's just having that discernment and things like that, and understanding, like, should I engage or indulge in this type of stuff?
No, absolutely. I found the quote really quick. Here's one from Nicholas Rogers, and then I have one from Ronald Hutton. They're real short quotes. So Nicholas Rogers, he's a history professor at York University. He said, "There's no hard evidence that Samhain was specifically devoted to the dead or to ancestor worship, despite claims to the contrary by some American folklorists. Samhain originally, at least, was less about death or evil, and it was more about the changing of the seasons and preparing for dormancy, the rebirth of nature. So it was a celebration." And then Ronald Hutton says, "There seems to be no doubt the opening of November was a time of major festival. It was celebrated in all parts of the British Isles with pastoral economy. At most, it may be said to have been general among the Celtic people. The Gauls apparently separated it as well, but there's no evidence that it was connected with the dead and no proof that it opened the year." And so I'm basically reading these quotes just to reiterate that, like, Samhain and like all these pagan things are not actually historically connected to
Yeah.
Halloween. But to jump and piggyback on what you were just saying, I completely agree. Like, there are people that are gonna do crazy stuff with candy. Like, you need to check the bags, you need to pray over it, pray over
Yeah.
your family. If
Yeah.
you are going to participate, like, once again, Samhain and Halloween are on the same night, and some people are practicing Samhain and other people are practicing Halloween. And so, for the people over here practicing Samhain, yeah, you should pray over your family. You should pray that God protects you guys. You should pray over, the candy and all that stuff. And I also do want to encourage people. Like, let's say someone's sitting here thinking, well, what if there's like some witch that prays over the Snickers bar, and I don't want to get some curse put on me. I want to read a verse about uh, food that's sacrificed to idols. So this is very similar, and this is in Paul's writings in First Corinthians 8. I'm just going to read a couple verses, but if you want the whole context, just go to the chapter 8, and you
Mhm.
can see it there. So he says in verse 8, "Food will not bring us close to God. We are neither the worse if we don't eat, nor the better if we do. But take care that this freedom of yours does not somehow become a stumbling block to the weak." So again, we can see that this is about discernment. It's, if you eat the food, you're not going to be harmed. If you don't eat it, you're not better if you do that. Like, some people want to feel self-righteous, like, well, I don't eat Halloween candy, and so I'm better. And so Paul is
Mhm.
saying, whether you partake or you don't, you're not going to be better or worse. However, he says, don't let this freedom of yours become a stumbling block. In other words, don't just start partaking in the candy and just like being all in on it, and then being a stumbling block for other people. And so it's all, once again, it all goes back to discernment.
Yeah, yeah. Well, how you're mentioning quotes, I think of, I don't know if you've heard of the satanic founder of the Satanic Church, Anton LaVey. He had said specifically on his deathbed, he said, "I'm glad that Christians, parents, let their children worship the devil at least one night a year." And he was talking about Halloween. And I just think it's so intriguing how the founder of the Satanic Church had mentioned this on his deathbed. Like, your deathbed is very crucial in what you say and what you do. And that's the one thing that he took, and he was so happy that we did. So my take is, why are we even just doing this, like, as Christians? And I believe that even Satan himself goes back to the garden in Genesis. He wanted to change our identity. He wanted us to get our eyes off God and not know that we were made in the image of God. So in all this, it may not be, it may seem harmless or not evil, but I think really it's trying to change the identity of our children, like having them think they're something they're not, instead of saying, like, I am a child of God, I am made in his image. And Satan loves nothing more than to take even our purity. He did it at the garden. He does it now. He tries to molest kids. He tries to show them pornography at a young age. He tries to do all these things that pervert them. And what other way to pervert them too is by showing them something they're not, or dressing up as something, and just making sure that their motives are pure too, and telling them as a parent, like, hey, you can dress up as this, but you are not identified as this. If you're a cat, you're not a cat like in real life, or you're a little girl, or you're a little boy, whatever you are, and things like that. So just intrigued by that he said that on his deathbed. So I don't know if you have any take on that, or if you've heard him say that or mention that.
So I've heard a lot of people say that, but I also heard someone say that there's no evidence that he actually did say this. And so I think I'm not sure. I don't want to say for sure, but I've heard some people say that um, this might not be a real quote. It might just be something people pass around to kind of keep pushing this myth. And
Mhm.
so for me, I'm once again, I don't know. He might have said it,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm just gonna say I would need to do some research on it to make sure that he actually did say that. I would want to know like who the primary source of that was so that we could know for sure. But if he did say that, I'll grant it for the sake of argument. I do believe sin is an intention of the heart. I really believe that. Even in the Old Testament in Leviticus, God made a distinction between intentionally sinning and unintentionally sinning. And so, like, if in your heart of hearts you are just like, I'm just having a good time, I'm just going with my family, getting some candy, there's God knows the intentions of the heart. And
Mhm.
so I would say that like if in your heart of hearts you don't feel convicted about it, then I think you're good because God understands the difference between you in your heart of hearts not having conviction. And here's another thing too. We should talk about conviction because I know some people that feel convicted about some things that like aren't sin. So for example, the like drinking like a one drink of alcohol, for example, is not a sin, but getting drunk is a sin.
Yes.
However, there are some people that feel convicted to never drink, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And so that's a real thing. And so I heard Mike Winger, to go back to him, he once said that like discernment and like conviction can make a good thing bad, but it can't make a bad thing okay. And so
Mhm.
I think that's a really good way of putting it. Like basically having a drink, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you personally are convicted about it, then don't drink, right? And that would be a
Mhm.
sin for you to drink. Same thing with Halloween. If you are watching this and you're saying, "Well, I personally feel convicted. I'm not gonna celebrate." That's fine. What I will say though is if you're one of those people, don't push that belief on others because if I'm not convicted that I should never have a drink, then you shouldn't force that on me because it's not a sin. Or if I don't feel convicted about Halloween, you shouldn't force that on me. And so we also have to kind of have that there are going to be Christians that have a genuine conviction against celebrating Halloween, and we should respect that. I really do. If someone in their heart of hearts is like, I just feel like God doesn't want me to participate, then I think we should respect that. But I
Mhm.
also don't think we should force that onto other people because if we're going off of the doctrine of sola scriptura, which is all of our doctrines come from the Bible
Mhm.
or they can be deduced from Scripture, there's nothing that we could deduce from Scripture that will keep us from, knocking on our neighbor's door and getting a Snickers bar. You know what I mean? And so we
Yeah.
shouldn't force that belief onto others. But if you have a personal conviction about it, let's honor that and respect that. I'm not gonna make someone feel like, oh, you're just a goody two shoes or something. Like, don't do any of that either. Like respect their convictions and let them have their walk with God.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned in your video about discernment, but what if people don't have discernment? Like, even as a Christian, I know that it's a gift to have discernment. And even me and Gabe are running into this recently, that Christians we know don't have discernment. Like,
Yep.
so what do you say to those that don't, know what they should do with discernment?
Well, two things. The first one I would say is James chapter 1 verse 5. It says, "If any of you lacks wisdom, may he ask God, and he will freely give it to you." And so, if you are sitting there and you're like, "Well, I don't know what I should do about Halloween." Ask God. Just be like, "Lord, give me wisdom. What would you have me do?" And if he says, "Yes, do it," then all means. If he says, "No, don't," then you're one of those people that God is giving you a conviction about it. I would also say, 1 Corinthians 12 it's like basically a full chapter on like the gifts of the Spirit. And
Yeah.
the Bible tells us to earnestly seek the gifts. And so if you don't have discernment, I would encourage you to seek it, to like, pray for it, to ask God for it, to
Hmm.
because honestly, discernment is a lot about wisdom. I think discernment is like a fruit of wisdom, is how I would describe it. It's like if you have wisdom, you will have discernment. And
Yeah.
so just ask God for wisdom, and I think discernment will come.
Yeah, and spending time with them, I think people want the gifts of God so bad, but they don't want to spend time with Him.
Yeah.
So just making sure that y'all are spending time with God. If you want these gifts, He will freely give them to you, but I believe you need to spend intimate time with Him as well. Um,
Absolutely.
so I will also say this, that I don't know if you've heard of John Ramirez. He is a ex warlock. He was very high
Mhm.
ranking in the satanic realm, and he
Yep.
did say this as well. He said that he would, as a warlock, when he would
Mm,
never step foot in a church on Easter or Christmas,
mm,
partake in communion or any of those things,
yeah.
because it was like as if he was cheating on the devil, and he never
Ooh.
wanted to be caught in the act of doing that. So
Yeah.
why do you think that we, even as Christians, feel like we're doing this with Halloween? I know you said
Yeah.
that some people don't have evil intentions, but even just being ignorant of the fact of maybe we are, communing with the devil. Maybe we are, cheating on God. We don't know. And I think that sometimes we don't know that we're committing adultery with God in things that we're doing. So just kind of what do you say about that and his take as a warlock with that?
Well, first of all, I think that's great that he didn't feel the freedom to, take the Lord's Supper, or be baptized or anything like that. That to me speaks to the power of God more than anything. It's like
Yeah.
he knew his place.
Yeah.
Um, as far as Halloween, I don't. Hmm. I think I would just again point to the idea that like Samhain and Halloween are kind of separate. They're like two separate things, and so if you're practicing one, you're not practicing the other. And so, I guess that would be my general take. Like if you go, door to door and get some candy bars with your family, you're not doing a séance with candles and with a Ouija board and stuff. So I would just say that those aren't the same thing, but you can feel free to disagree with that, and that's perfectly fine. And I know people will. I know
Yeah.
we're in the comment section gonna see some people disagreeing with me, and that's fine. I mean, I understand if you put out anything publicly, you're gonna have people disagree. So
Yeah.
I'm willing to I'm ready to see those comments. But
Yeah, he's very
yeah,
radical. He really believes that we shouldn't at all. Like he really
yeah,
believes that when you dress up, you're giving legal rights to the devil to be that, and you come into agreement with those things. So
mm,
I know people have their take, and he even said, it takes is one time to fall, like it did in the garden. And I
yeah,
believe that with your intentions, like if you really want to sin or you have lust of the eye, lust of the flesh. But
mhm,
children are really innocent and they don't know. And I think the enemy, puts them in a mousetrap to like say, here, you're gonna fall, here, you're gonna lose your
mhm,
purity, and things like that. But just really, praying as a parent, what you should do, what your family should do. If you're married, pray together, seek wisdom, seek
yep,
counsel on just what you should do. I know everyone doesn't have those convictions, but for me and Gabe, we have those convictions.
sure,
I don't believe in going out and things like that, and Halloween, trick or treating, and all that. Just because, I've learned so much and I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel safe. And not that I'm scared. I'm not scared of them. If I need to
mhm,
cast out a devil, I'll cast out a devil. But
good,
just
cast 'em out.
just that we want to do better. And like I said,
Mhm,
we want to have a church and we want to evangelize. And when that day comes, we want to do those things and promote the gospel and not so much all of trick or treating or costumes, but truly Jesus and the one who died for us.
sure. And maybe you'll be one of those people that just hand out gospel tracts at your house, you know? You
Yeah,
like
yeah, something different, but
yeah,
yeah,
you might just print out a bunch of gospel tracts and hand them out to people as they come by, and like I said, I respect that. If you guys have your convictions on that, I'm not gonna say anything negative about you. I totally respect that. You're trying to honor God with your lives and, you know, rock on with it, you know, and I think that's great.
yeah, we actually have a friend, or Gabe has a friend who has an online track. He started it and he's creating a
Mhm.
business out of it. So I know that that's
Cool.
one thing that we can promote too as Christians. Like, hey, scan this QR code and learn about Jesus, or learn all these little facets of him and who he is. But
Yeah.
yeah, well, I think that's all I have for you, Nate. I really
Alright.
appreciate you taking time and talking with us and my viewers, and hopefully someone learned something today. If y'all did, leave a comment. If you have any questions, Nate can freely jump on as well. I can tag him
Yeah.
and let him know, and or me jump in and just let y'all know the history and things like that, or if you have any questions. So thank you, Nate. We appreciate it, and
Thank you.
thank you just for coming.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody is interested, I do have a YouTube channel called The Epitome. It's right here under, and I do
Yes.
apologetics videos. So feel free to swing by.
Yeah, check out his channel. He is an aspiring apologist, and he knows so much. He really he went to Free Chapel College with me, and he's learning just as well as I'm learning, and he's rocking it. He's rocking it, and he's really bringing light to the gospel. You're welcome.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Nate. We'll see you next time, and thank y'all for tuning in. Bye, guys.
Thanks for having me.